Billionaire's daughter only has 3 months to live, but a surprising donation emerges. Chloe Madison stared down at the slip of paper trembling in her hand, her mind swirling. 3 months, only 3 months left to live. The words echoed in her ears, drowning out the chatter of the bustling cafe around her. Glimmering chandeliers and finely dressed patrons blurred into insignificance. How could this be her reality? Glamour, beauty, and her perfect life crumbled to dust against a diagnosis that felt both surreal and crushing. She had always strived for her father's approval, presenting a polished, ideal surface. Yet now, with death's shadow looming, she felt the mask slipping. Her father, Richard Madison, had always been consumed by his empire. A billionaire oil tycoon too busy conquering the world to truly see his only daughter. Success meant everything to him, and emotional intimacy was another casualty of his relentless ambition. Though she held accolades, beauty, and a burgeoning career, Chloe felt like an outcast in her own family. Would the distant man she longed to connect with even care about the inevitable? Tension tightened in her chest, suffocating her every thought. She imagined Richard's response. Would he be embarrassed by her plight? Burdened by the sudden need to confront their fractured relationship? The intensifying realities of her diagnosis forced her into a moral dilemma. Should she fight for a connection or retreat to the safety of solitude, away from the rejection that surely awaited her? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Chloe's mind raced as she stumbled upon her grandmother's dusty box in the attic, filled with letters and documents reflecting a legacy she could never have anticipated. A community foundation meant to support those struggling with medical expenses lay beneath layers of neglect. This discovery sparked a flicker of hope within her that felt almost sinful. Could this be her last chance to forge a connection with both her father and the world outside their gilded confines? But shame pulsed beneath Chloe's determination. How would Richard react to her plans? He had always scoffed at giving back, viewing the struggles of regular people as failures rather than challenges. Would her attempts to reconcile with their shared humanity only amplify the distances between them, or worse, expose her vulnerabilities that both feared and longed for? As Chloe poured her heart into revitalizing the foundation, internal doubts clawed at her sanity. Heart racing, breathing uneven, she prepared to confront her father, pace quickening as she envisioned their inevitable arguments. The knowledge of her impending mortality wrapped dangerously close to her heartbeat, intensifying her resolve. But deep inside, despair clawed at her. Would the time be enough to reach him, or would they be forever trapped in their conflicting worlds? With mounting pressure and an unexpected letter of encouragement from a single mother whose life had been altered by the foundation, the idea of aligning her journey with her father began to emerge. The stakes were enormous. The life of the foundation, and perhaps an understanding with Richard, hanging precariously at the edge of common ground. As she prepared for the upcoming fundraiser that could change everything, the storm of feelings surged through her. Dread, hope, a desperate need for redemption. An unanswered final call loomed for both Chloe and Richard, challenging them to confront the impenetrable rift that separated their hearts. Would love reign before time ran out? Or would they remain bound by unacknowledged fears that threatened to fracture their family forever? The darkness encroaching felt heavier and heavier, and Chloe's heart raced with urgency. Her legacy, her future, and the truth of their relationship all teetered dangerously on the edge. Chloe's fingers trembled as she drafted her speech for the upcoming fundraiser. It felt like a lifeline, an opportunity to finally breach the chasm separating her and her father. But with each sentence, doubt nestled deeper in her mind. What if Richard's response was one of ridicule instead of support? The anticipation churned her stomach, knotting her insides. After countless revisions, that distant box of letters loomed in her thoughts, guiding her hand as she spoke of hope, compassion, and healing. Her voice wavered slightly, the words neither embellishments for applause nor empty platitudes. They were an appeal for connection, a bridge to a heart she hoped still held room for her. 2 days before the fundraiser, Chloe stood in front of her mirror rehearsing. Each time she made eye contact with her reflection, she searched for conviction, a heartbeat of belief that she could face Richard. But the image staring back felt like a stranger, the glitz and glamour of her life now rolling off her like water from a duck's back. What if there was nothing left of the poised woman everyone expected her to be? That evening, Samuel, a close friend and a former charity director, arrived to help refine her approach. His presence was reassuring as he reminded her of the goodness the foundation could ignite. Chloe found comfort in his grounded perspective, but when she broached the subject of her father, she noticed a flicker of concern cross his face. "Chloe, do you really think he's going to support this?" Samuel asked, leaning against the doorway. "Your father is a businessman, not a philanthropist." A tight fist clamped around her heart at his words. "I need to try," she asserted. The urgency of her situation pressed down on her shoulders like a suffocating weight. "I've waited too long. It's time to show him the impacts of generosity beyond profit margins. I can't just accept this fate without at least attempting to change the conversation." "But what if it doesn't work? What if he turns his back on you, again?" The finality behind Samuel's words hit hard. Chloe felt the dagger of fear plunge deeper. Would trying to bridge their relationship lead her to further heartache, or could it open a door long shut? Each thought was like a pendulum swinging from hope to dread, moments of clarity to crippling hesitation. On the day of the fundraiser, Chloe descended the grand staircase in a dress that shimmered brighter than her fading spirit. Shifting her weight from foot to foot, she adjusted her posture, forcing herself to rise above the emotions swirling inside. The atmosphere was electric, but she felt detached, observing rather than participating. Richard arrived late, a flurry of power and influence, instantly filling the room with his presence. Chloe's heart raced as she caught sight of him, the familiar mix of admiration and trepidation pulsing through her. She had meticulously crafted her plan, but the sight of him left her feeling exposed, vulnerable in ways she had long buried. "Dad," she greeted, her voice steady yet raw. But instantly Chloe noticed the walls surrounding him. He surveyed the crowd, scanning for deals, for connections. As they made eye contact, the flicker of recognition and indifference played across his features like a rehearsed script. "No speeches today, Chloe. Just the business opportunities, please," he replied dismissively, barely meeting her gaze as he pivoted to speak with someone else. The sting of his rejection surged, igniting her defiance. It wasn't just a matter of charity. This was about their fractured relationship, about confronting the truth that had been unspoken for years. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. Before she could reconsider, she picked up the microphone, the crowd silencing around her. "I need to talk to you, Dad," she called out, every eye in the room now trained on her. The gravity of the moment settled. As Richard turned to face her, she steeled herself. She was no longer merely the daughter seeking approval. She was a woman standing on the precipice of a precarious truth. "It's time to discuss us," she declared, her heart pounding in synchronicity with the words. Across the room, she could feel the weight of scrutiny bearing down, but even heavier was the urgency illuminating her own desperate plea. She was ready to confront the unyielding silence that had defined their relationship. The stakes felt higher now than ever, a last-ditch effort not just to salvage what remained, but to redefine her legacy itself. Chloe's heart raced with both trepidation and determination. Would this confrontation lead to the understanding she yearned for, or would it push her further into the depths of isolation she feared? The air thickened as she met Richard's gaze, the moment of truth upon them like a tightly coiled spring ready to snap. Chloe felt the air shift, the room's collective breath held captive by her unexpected declaration. The eyes of attendees bore into her, yet she focused solely on Richard. Silence wrapped around them, an anticipation so thick it felt suffocating. "What did you say?" he retorted, his tone revealing just a hint of disbelief mixed with irritation. "I said, it's time to discuss us," she repeated, her voice unwavering, though her heart raced relentlessly. The consequences of her choice dawned upon her. This was no longer just a matter of charity or approval. It was about claiming her voice in a conversation that had lingered in the background, unaddressed for far too long. Richard's brows knitted together, the powerful businessman momentarily shaken. But she could sense the wall rising back up around him. "Chloe, this isn't the place," he began, trying to sidestep the confrontation. "No," she interrupted, shaking her head vehemently. "This is exactly the place. I won't allow you to hide behind your deals and connections anymore." Each word bounced off the microphone, reverberating through the polished venue. The crowd gasped, their saturation with intrigue and tension palpable. With every passing second, Chloe felt a surge of rebellious strength. Richard turned, pulling himself to his full stature, the authority emanating from him unmistakable. "You're making a scene. This is unprofessional," he warned, voice sharp as glass. The sting of his disapproval cut deep, yet she stood resolute. "Is it unprofessional to want to reconnect with my father?" She could hardly contain the depth of emotion that bubbled to the surface, all the hurt and confusion engulfing her in a tidal wave. "You can't keep treating me like a business transaction," he scoffed, gesturing dismissively. "I didn't raise you to be like this. We don't air personal grievances here. It's about results, Chloe." "Results?" she echoed incredulously, anger pulsing through her veins. "Is that all you ever see in life? Numbers? You're my father, not just a business figure in my life. I deserve more than your indifference." Chloe could feel Samuel's concerned gaze from the sidelines, but she pushed through the vulnerable barrier surrounding her. "You taught me what success looks like," she continued, matching his intensity. "But do you even know what a real relationship is? You take the achievements, the accolades, and you hoard them like trophies, but none of it means anything without connection." The line dividing them felt more ambiguous than ever. Behind her words, she sensed fragments of the father she once cherished, the man who had guided her, until the sole bond she knew collapsed under the weight of expectations. Could this confrontation be the turning point towards something real? Richard's expression shifted imperceptibly, and for the first time she glimpsed threads of vulnerability weaving into his persona. But the moment shattered as he jerked back, setting the distance again. "You're risking everything for a fleeting emotional moment," he hissed, his voice low but intensely fierce. "You have a reputation to uphold." Reputation? It was almost laughable. In that room of stunning achievements and glistening chandeliers, she realized maintaining a facade had become worthless to her. "If I have to choose between a reputation and having a father, I'd choose the latter." The room buzzed with murmurs, the intensity rising with every exchanged glance. Chloe understood she was standing on the edge of a precipice, a defining moment teetering between loss and liberation. The ball was no longer solely in Richard's court. Her confession ignited something in her that had long been dormant, a sense of self that was beginning to reclaim its place. "Chloe," he began again, clearly unsettled, "you don't understand." "No, Dad, you don't understand," she shot back, the resolve ignited beyond all doubt. The boldness of her soul intertwined with the weight of her past. "You need to listen." In that moment, she felt the fierce possibility of true connection flickering before her. Would her daring act provoke a genuine exchange or merely further entrench them in their roles as disconnected figures in each other's lives? The clock ticked down in a silent crescendo of uncertainty. Chloe drew in a deep breath, ready for whatever may come next. The path before her was shrouded in doubt, but one thing remained clear. She had lit a spark in Richard's world, and now it was time to see if they could foster a fire that could consume the desolation defined by their silence. As she held his gaze, resolute, she wondered, was this the small crack in the wall that had separated them for years, or merely a prelude to deeper rifts? Chloe's heart pounded against her ribcage as the silence followed her words like a charged embrace. She had crossed a line she never thought she'd step over, into Richard's guarded realm, where emotions lay dormant under layers of expectation and practicality. Around them, expressions of disbelief morphed into a mixture of admiration and concern, and Chloe felt exposed yet empowered. "Do you really believe this display is going to change anything?" Richard's voice cut through her reverie, an edge of disbelief sharpening the air. Behind him, the audience was quieter than ever, their gazes flickering between them like moths drawn to light. Did he not realize that she had already changed herself? "I believe it starts a conversation we've been avoiding for too long," she said, lowering her voice but not her conviction. Chloe could feel her professionalism battling against personal truths, and she chose to lean into the uncertainty. "We can't keep pretending that the family bond you talk about exists only within the context of your boardroom. I need to know if I'm even worth your time as a daughter." He shook his head, frustration radiating from him like heat from asphalt on a summer's day. "You don't understand the repercussions of your actions. You risk everything for a moment of clarity." Those words stung. Her actions, her truth, her desire for a father's love framed as a reckless risk. But she remembered the years spent cloaked beneath his achievements, the accolades piling up like trophies while their relationship lay in ruins. "Isn't that just it?" she countered, stepping closer, accepting the rising tide of tension. "What is there to risk if we're not even standing on solid ground?" Richard faltered, a flicker of something, recognition, regret, briefly illuminating his features. Could it be that they were both caught in a web woven from the past? Each hour spent in silence, in detached formality, only reinforced the distance. Chloe sensed that, within that flickering revelation, lay a possibility for growth, if only she could keep the momentum alive. "You've always pushed me toward achieving goals with this idea of success," she continued, her voice steady but her heart quaking inside. "But I'm starting to realize that I don't want to succeed in a world where I don't have you as a part of it." As she spoke, she was surprised by her own authenticity, a reflection of the growth she had wrestled with, but never fully embraced, until now. There was strength in vulnerability, and even more in standing resolutely in the face of rejection. Richard remained silent, a landscape of emotions washing over him in waves. In that beat of stillness, Chloe seized her chance. "This isn't just an emotional plea. I need to know who you are as my father, beyond the strong facade of the businessman. We can redefine what it means to be family." A ripple of understanding, though faint, seemed to emerge between them. Richard's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if her words had dismantled some long-held schism. "You think we can come back from this?" he asked, the edge in his voice smoothing as he searched her expression. "I don't think we can afford to avoid it any longer. We've held each other at arm's length for too long, don't you think?" Chloe recognized the risk she was taking, yet a newfound resolve anchored her spirit. Richard's gaze shifted as he absorbed her plea, a storm of conflict playing behind his hazel eyes. The silence spoke louder than before, and Chloe realized that these moments of vulnerability were a signal of impending change. But just as the air between them began to hum with potential, a sharp notification from Richard's phone broke the tension. A frown creased his brow as he glanced down before looking back at Chloe, urgency creeping back into his demeanor. "Excuse me, I need to take this," he muttered, stepping back, his expression once again cloaked in businesslike professionalism. Chloe watched as he turned away, her emotions tangled in disappointment and hope. Had she opened the door only for it to slam shut again? The warmth of their connection felt fleeting, as if the moment had slipped through her fingers just when she was ready to grasp it. In the dejection clinging to her shoulders, Chloe resolved that she couldn't let this be where their story ended. They had just begun unearthing truths, and she refused to let that flame die. Clenching her fists, she vowed to ensure that the next step would be hers to take. The journey would demand daring, and she was determined to ignite Richard's spirit just as she had lit her own. The question was, how far was she willing to go to make that happen? As Richard strode away, she felt the weight of his absence pressing down on her, and a vital realization dawned. It was time to prove that reconnecting with her father meant facing both of their fears head-on, and she was prepared to engage in whatever conflict lay on the horizon. But would Richard choose to join her, or would she be left navigating the tumultuous waters of self-discovery alone? The tension hung in the air, much like the unfolding events of her life, perilous yet potentially liberating. Chloe felt the whirlwind of Richard's abrupt exit slashing through her newfound resolve, leaving her in a haze of uncertainty. Standing amid the remnants of their confrontation, she grasped for clarity, but the vibrant energy she had ignited seemed to wither in his absence. It was almost as if Richard's departure had siphoned off the potential for change. She fought the instinct to retreat, to let doubt coalesce into resignation. Instead, determination fueled her every impulse. She couldn't allow the echoes of their conversation to fade into another chapter of silence. In that critical silence, she understood her next move. She needed to provoke a response, a shift, anything that would keep their probing dialogue alive. Taking a deep breath, Chloe turned away from the crowd as they dispersed into murmurs of her audacity, their admiration mingling with whispers of concern. The fate of her familial relationship rested heavily on her shoulders, and retreat was not an option. Maybe this larger audience witnessing her struggle could become her allies in the quest for validation. Chloe pulled out her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she typed a message to her family, specifically inviting Richard to a private dinner. It felt audacious given the last encounter, but she forced herself to believe it was necessary. "I want to understand you better," she wrote, heart racing at the rawness of her own words. "I need us to face this." She hit send, then immediately felt a wave of vulnerability crash into her resolve. Was she foolish for reaching out at a moment marked with reluctance? Her mother's doubt echoed in her mind. "Don't push too hard, Chloe. Establish boundaries." But this was about more than boundaries. It was about redefining them altogether. Days passed, and each tick of the clock felt like an agonizing reminder of time slipping through her fingers. Each morning, she would wake with a flutter of hope that today would be the day Richard would respond, only to be met with silence, familiar yet painful. Finally, as twilight draped the sky in hues of orange and violet, a reply arrived. A simple acknowledgement, "I'll be there." Chloe's heart raced, rising with a fragile optimism. She was determined not simply to seek connection, but to turn vulnerability into a shared truth. The night of the dinner arrived, and Chloe transformed her modest dining room into a sanctuary. Flickering candles cast shadows against the walls, warm colors bathing the reminders of her past, photographs, the diplomas and recognitions she'd earned, all symbols of where she came from and what she wished to transcend. As she set the table, a familiar surge of fear mixed with determination coursed through her. This would not be a conversation of business attire or transactional gestures. It would be an unveiling of self. She prepared her heart for the challenge ahead.
When Richard finally crossed the threshold, her breath caught in her throat. His eyes flickered around the room, the briefest shadow of recognition passing over his features. This was a space of familiarity cloaked in new meanings, a potential force for reconciliation. "Wow," he said quietly, taking in the ambiance. "You really went all out, didn't you?" Chloe met his gaze, feeling the weight of her choices settle around her like a cloak. "I thought it was time for us to drop the facade," she said, steadying her voice, "to be real with each other." Richard looked her in the eye, and for the first time she saw a glimmer of the connection they both so desperately craved. As they sat down, the air filled with unspoken words. The prospect of their conversation loomed before them like a chasm waiting to be crossed. What revelations would reveal themselves in the vulnerability of that moment? As Richard picked up his fork, Chloe sensed the potential for huge personal discoveries, not just for herself, but for him too. The question lingered. Would Richard have the courage to embrace the truth, or would the walls of his own making disrupt this fragile initiation? As the first hesitant words were spoken, both of their fates hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of emotional honesty and the familiar comfort of avoidance. Would they seize the opportunity or let it slip away yet again? Chloe could feel the tension in the air as she and Richard shared the first meal together in what felt like an eternity. Each bite seemed heavy with the weight of unsaid things, and a quiet dread began to curl in the pit of her stomach. This dinner was more than just a meal. It was a nexus of past grievances and unspoken hopes. "Chloe, about what happened the other day," Richard began, his voice breaking through her thoughts. She looked up, meeting his gaze. There lay no longer an air of superiority, but rather a flicker of uncertainty, an opening she had long sought. "I think we need to start from the beginning," she suggested, her voice steadying despite the hurricane of emotions swirling within her. "What do you really want from this family?" The question hung in the air, daring him to touch the truth that had been brushed aside for
far too long. Richard hesitated, his eye darting towards the flickering candlelight. I guess I just want everyone to see the real me. But sometimes it feels safer to keep up appearances," he said slowly, revealing a vulnerability that disarmed her. A part of her wanted to interrogate, to push deeper, yet she held back. This was a delicate moment. Her own journey had shown her the burden of expectations one could carry. "What does that look like?" Chloe asked, pulling at the thread of his honesty. "What does it mean to be real to you?" He sighed deeply before answering, the sound heavy with the weight of unshed burdens. "It means presenting myself as something I'm not," he confessed. "I can be the family's golden boy, a successful businessman, but it all feels so hollow. When we fought, it felt like a wake-up call. If I can't even be honest with you, then what does that say about my life?" Her heart raced as his words began to reshape the narrative she had built in her mind. He was trapped in a role he had created, an unyielding persona that shielded him from the weight of authenticity. She sensed the ripples of potential growth emerging from this realization, not just for Richard, but for herself. Chloe leaned in, her fingers curling around her glass. "If it's empty, maybe it's time to break that mold together," she offered, her voice softer now, inviting him into a shared vulnerability. "I'm tired of pretending too." As they navigated their stories through shared food, voices grew steadier, more animated. Unbeknownst to them, they were dismantling the barriers that had long governed their interactions. With every revelation, fear transformed into determination, not only for their relationship, but individually. "Do you think we could help each other become our truer selves?" Richard asked, his tone hopeful yet tinged with fear. The question hung pregnant with implications as Chloe considered it, recognizing a bitter truth. Authenticity demanded courage, and in that courage, they would eventually unearth buried talents within themselves. "Yes," she finally replied, a small smile breaking the tension. "But it's going to take work, and maybe some missteps along the way. We'll face it together." Their conversation rolled from one topic to another, from laughter to moments of silence weighted with understanding. The groundwork for a new relationship was being carved out, one that could lead them beyond the facades they typically presented to the world. Yet, in the back of her mind, Chloe felt a shadow of doubt creep in. What if this newfound openness encountered more resistance than they anticipated? What if Richard's fears resurfaced to bind him once more in armor? As they exchanged stories, she realized her own challenge lay in embracing that vulnerability too, pushing past the amnesia of familial affection that had dulled her approach for years. What if opening the door to their true selves pushed them into uncharted territory? To her, the journey was fraught with both trepidation and possibilities. Would they have the strength to navigate the storm together, or would it break them apart just when they had begun to merge? Chloe lifted her glass to propose a toast, uncertainty lingering thick in her throat. "To breaking the mold, whatever that may mean," she declared, her eyes searching Richard's for his commitment to confront the complexity of their lives. And yet, the lingering question remained. Would his commitment hold true when faced with the full weight of their family's past? As they clinked glasses, she felt the shifting tides of possibility stir around them, shadowed by the impending confrontation with their truths. Would they brave that inevitable storm, or would it wash away their momentum? Over the next few weeks, Chloe felt a subtle transformation in her demeanor. The lingering tension between her and Richard took on new dimensions. Their conversations flowed with an unfamiliar ease. As they exchanged ideas and stories, the air often sparkled with electricity, fueled by their shared commitment to personal growth. But even as laughter bubbled between them, a gnawing anxiety settled in her chest. The potential for failure loomed large. Chloe began to recognize the facets of herself she had long ignored. Her natural inclination towards keeping the peace stemmed from years of walking on eggshells. It was a habit rooted deep within her family's culture. This realization propelled her into a series of exploration evenings, solo ventures where she tried sketching, pottery, and even public speaking. Each experience was a foray into self-expression, allowing her to confront the fears that had knotted themselves around her aspirations. One humid afternoon, she found herself at a ceramics class, her fingers muddy with clay as she molded absurd shapes on the wheel. The instructor encouraged her to embrace the imperfection, reminding them all that artistry thrived in the unexpected. Chloe's anxiety lessened with each round of the wheel, her spirit healing as the creative process absorbed her completely. There was a beauty in the raw and untamed nature of her work. It mirrored the unrefined layers of her own truth waiting to emerge. Meanwhile, Richard too was navigating his own awakening. His approach shifted as he confronted his corporate identity, relinquishing the facades he carefully constructed throughout his career. In meetings, he began to voice his ideas more assertively. He was surprised at the positive feedback from his colleagues. Feeling their trust in him bolster his confidence, he excitedly pursued new projects that felt more aligned with his authentic self. Yet with each step forward came an array of doubts that clawed at their newfound resolve. Knocking at the door of Richard's consciousness was the question of how his family would react to this metamorphosis. Although he had tasted the sweetness of authenticity, the bitter taste of familial expectations lingered, threatening to sour the moments he once relished in at work. Would his peers still hold him in esteem if he deviated from the golden boy persona? Despite the turbulence, their connection deepened, wrought with an understanding forged from early shared vulnerabilities. They often spent evenings crafting plans to balance their aspirations and responsibilities, their collaboration enhancing their individual visions. But the specter of doubt remained, entwining itself around their discussions as they ventured deeper into the unknown.
Chloe grappled with her own looming internal conflict. Not long after the pottery class, she stumbled upon an opportunity to host a community art exhibit. While the prospect thrilled her, the weight of showcasing her work publicly felt paralyzing. What if her creations, so deeply tied to her evolving identity, didn't resonate with others? The fear of rejection gnawed at her, sanity fracturing under the pressure of self-exposure. Determined to face her fears head-on, she penned a journal entry, thoughtfully weighing the risks against the potential rewards. The act of writing, unfiltered and free, became cathartic. It underscored her resolve. She owed it to herself to embrace vulnerability, to stand tall against the tide of judgment. She pictured Richard's encouraging smile, imagined his voice gently coaxing her fears into honesty. With renewed vigor, she reached out to potential participants, her heart racing as she awaited responses. Simultaneously, empathy grew deeper. Richard shared with Chloe his own intentions to expand his role at work. They were teetering on the edge of dual commitments, his corporate authenticity and her artistic self-expression. But in the corners of her mind, Chloe couldn't shake the feeling that an impending storm loomed on the horizon. Would they maintain their individually forged paths, or would external forces intervene to shatter their newfound clarity? Determined yet anxious about what lay ahead, Chloe took a deep breath one evening alone, pen poised over paper, ready to unite her yearning for growth with the fear of exposure. As she wrote down the lines of vision and desires, an errant thought distracted her. What would Richard think if it all fell apart? The realization chilled her spine as the clarity of her ambitions began to blur under the specter of potential setback. And then the phone rang. The pulsating tone pulled her away from the depth of her musings. It was Richard, his voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. Something significant was about to unfold, something that could redefine the path they were carving. As dread mingled with anticipation, Chloe braced herself for the challenge that awaited. What news could change everything? Chloe gripped the phone, her heart racing at Richard's words. There was urgency in his tone that made her pulse quicken. He was in the midst of a pivotal meeting related to a high-stakes project that could thrust him into a leadership position. But under the excitement, she sensed an underlying vulnerability, a fear that mirrored her own. It prompted a cascade of questions in her mind. Was this opportunity secure, or merely an illusion that could unravel? "Chloe, I need your perspective," he said, pulling her from her thoughts. "I'm drafting a proposal for a new initiative, but I want to integrate something that reflects
my newfound vision. I know you've been exploring art and expression. What do you think?" His request ignited a flicker of inspiration. What if the initiative connected with the community in a way that illuminated artistic roads, finding spaces for creativity where once there were none? However, the risk of presenting something that could fail weighed heavily on her conscience. The creeping doubt whispered that perhaps they were both in over their heads. "I think you should emphasize authenticity," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Showcase what you've learned about being true to yourself and how others can embrace that journey too." "Right, that's it, Chloe. Maybe I could curate a series of workshops, like the ones you've been doing," he said, excitement punctuating his words. "It's a chance to build something meaningful, together." The together tethered them in what felt like an uncharted collaboration. However, anxiety clawed at her gut. Was it even feasible to merge their disparate worlds? She had spent a lifetime apprehensive about expressing herself fully, while Richard was still navigating the choppy waters of his corporate identity. Their paths felt intertwined yet starkly separate. Over the next few days, as Richard immersed himself in the proposal, Chloe struggled with her own project. Each piece of art she created echoed her feelings of uncertainty. With each stroke, she confronted not just her fears, but also the shadows of doubt that crowded her thoughts. An exhibit could reveal the vibrant colors of her identity, or expose the cracks in her confidence. Then, one evening, during a particularly frustrating session in her studio, she smashed her clay creation to the ground. The sound reverberated through the silence like an explosion of frustration. "Why am I doing this?" she muttered, fighting back tears. The whirlwind of emotions, fear, doubt, and the unwavering desire for acceptance clashed violently within her. In the aftermath of the mess, a definitive realization struck her like a flash of lightning. She had spent too long living within layers of expectations, both her own and those imposed by others. What would it mean to truly be vulnerable? With renewed determination, she set to work, not on creating art that would please the eye, but on pieces that genuinely resonated with her evolving self. In a daring shift, she planned to depict her journey through abstract representations, each piece embodying the essence of growth, fear, and resilience. As she delved deeper into her process, Chloe received a surprising email. A local gallery was interested in showcasing emerging artists. A small voice within urged her to submit her work. Her heart raced with equal parts hope and apprehension. The thought of vulnerability swelled inside her. Would they see the truth she longed to share, or would they dismiss it all as mere chaos? In tandem, Richard's project was taking shape as well. He revealed he had reached out to invite established artists to mentor aspiring talents at a collaborative event. Their synergy was unfolding, yet beneath it loomed a sense of impending change. They were both stepping into unfamiliar territory, traversing paths riddled with uncertainties and potential public scrutiny. The phone rang again, slicing through Chloe's concentration. It was Richard. "Chloe, they loved the proposal, but there's a catch," he informed her with an edge of anxiety that didn't go unnoticed. "What kind of catch?" she asked, her heart sinking. "The board wants something bold, something that could create quite a splash," he continued, and a chill ran down her spine at his choice of words. Could a sudden change of direction threaten not only their budding collaboration, but everything they had come to embrace? Chloe's breath caught in her throat as she contemplated the obstacles that now lay ahead. The moment of truth was upon them, a precipice from which they might leap if they dared. But could they hold firm against the mounting pressure? Would this challenge redefine them or tear the fabric of their aspirations apart? As silence stretched in the wake of Richard's words, Chloe felt the weight of their choices balance precariously on the edge of a knife. Chloe paced her small studio, the weight of Richard's words lingering in the air like smoke. The idea of creating something bold filled her with a mix of anticipation and dread. Could vulnerability in art translate to commercial success? Was it even possible for her to step forward and be seen, to reveal her true self alongside his corporate initiative? She picked up her sketchbook, the pages filled with half-formed ideas that hadn't satisfied her. What was holding her back? Was it the fear of rejection? The dread of her art failing to resonate? In moments of introspection, she recognized that each flawed attempt merely echoed her internal conflict about identity and acceptance. As days passed, the noise of Richard's bold proposal grew louder in the recesses of her mind. In their last conversation, he had spoken of his desire for their initiative to be impactful, proclaiming change in a world that often felt stagnant. But how could she contribute to something that demanded a level of confidence she struggled to summon? Her art, or rather her journey through it, needed to speak the truth, her truth. An idea sparked as she mulled over Richard's call. What if she used her journey of self-discovery as the centerpiece of their collaboration? It wouldn't be merely about showcasing talent. It would involve a raw exploration of what it meant to struggle for authenticity in a world that often shunned it. The budding desire to challenge herself burned brighter. Fueled by this realization, Chloe began drafting her proposal. She envisioned workshops that combined Richard's corporate acumen with her artistic vision. The sessions would invite participants to confront their fears through creative expression, allowing them a safe space to explore, innovate, and ultimately share their own stories of growth and vulnerability. It was bold, It was risky, but most importantly, it resonated deeply with her internal struggle. As she worked through the logistics, how one might connect with the other, a subsequent thought sent shivers down her spine. What if people rejected it? What if they saw her efforts as a muddle of chaotic ideas? But a voice within urged her to persist. If Richard was willing to back it, maybe the world would too. When she finally connected with him, it was as if the air crackled with potential. They met at a coffee shop buzzing with life and energy. Richard's face lit up when she explained her idea, and for the first time, she saw the leadership potential that had been simmering beneath his apprehensions. "This could be it, Chloe," he said, his eyes sparking with excitement. "This could be the catapult we need to make our mark." However, a sense of foreboding crashed over her at the same time. "But what if it doesn't work? What if we fall flat on our faces?" she countered, revealing the vulnerability she had begun to embrace. Richard regarded her with seriousness. "What if we fly, Chloe? What if we redefine what this project means?" His words echoed with possibility, but also demanded courage, a courage she desperately wanted to harness. In that moment, Chloe felt the scales tip in her favor. Perhaps failure was only a stepping stone, an opportunity for growth. She realized that the essence of art lay in its imperfection, its ability to evoke emotion, and she needed to adopt that philosophy beyond her canvas. As plans solidified, Chloe's heart raced with the impending reality of their endeavor. They set a meeting with the board to present their ideas, and her confidence, once merely a flickering flame, morphed into a steady burn. If she could embrace the chaos, perhaps others could too. But the nerves in her stomach twisted at the thought of presenting in front of the board. It was one thing to share her work in the comfort of her studio, another entirely to expose her aspirations to critics who held the power to shape or shatter their dreams. As the meeting approached, Chloe pondered how far she had come in just a few short days. From breaking her artwork in frustration to collaborating with someone like Richard, maybe, just maybe, this leap of faith would lead her to a new horizon. Yet in her gut, she sensed that the real challenge was yet to come. The day arrived, and she stood before the intimidating boardroom, Richard by her side, armed with their compiled vision. The air grew thick with anxiety, but within this whirlpool of uncertainty, Chloe was finally ready to discover if her voice mattered. "Are you ready?" Richard whispered, a hint of apprehension in his tone. Chloe nodded, taking a deep breath. "Let's show them what we can do." With their proposal in hand, they stepped into the room, but the shadows of doubt still lingered. As the door closed behind them, Chloe could feel the weight of their ambitions pressing down, both exhilarating and terrifying. Were they prepared to face the harsh realities of rejection? Or would this moment unveil an opportunity that would change everything? Inside, the moment of truth loomed ominously on the horizon. Would they take the plunge together, or would trepidation pull them back into the depths of self-doubt? Chloe Madison stood at the threshold of a new dawn, her heart racing as she faced the board members seated around the polished conference table. Richard stood beside her, a steadfast ally amid the uncertainty that buzzed in the air. It was a stark contrast to the silence they had once endured. Today, their voices would rise together. As the presentation began, Chloe spoke with an unwavering cadence, detailing her vision for workshops that merged corporate insight with artistic self-discovery. With every word, she painted a picture not just of potential success, but of a deeper shift in their lives, a reclamation of authenticity in a world that often demanded compliance. Richard interjected with insights that amplified her suggestions, his energy matching hers as they formed an unbreakable rhythm. Together, they carved out a space where creativity and business could coexist, fostering growth for themselves and others. The board's initial skepticism slowly thawed. Questions turned into nods of understanding, and soon they were discussing the logistics of implementing Chloe's ideas. It was exhilarating. She realized they were no longer just discussing a project, but rather constructing a legacy of connection and community.
For the first time, she felt her heart swell with hope and pride. This was more than a pitch, it was a promise of reinvention. Yet, as enthusiasm surged, so did the remnants of doubt. Were they truly ready to diverge from the constraints of expectation? Would the board genuinely back them? Or would they view this idea as a mere whim, a fleeting fancy doomed to fail? The presentation concluded with heartfelt applause, a sound that swallowed her lingering fears. Richard turned to her, urgency shining in his eyes. "You did it! We did it!" he exclaimed, his voice bubbling over with excitement. Chloe felt elation and liberation pour over her like a warm embrace. They had confronted their fears, and the outcome was something they could build upon. Days turned into weeks, and momentum gained traction. Richard's colleagues and boards began to engage with the project, excitement echoing in every conversation. Workshops transformed into engaging collaborations, participants expressing themselves through art and dialogue. Chloe witnessed lives changing around her, including her own. Emboldened by the progress, she dove deeper into her artistic expression. Each workshop enhanced her understanding of vulnerability, both in herself and others. Artistic pieces emerged, reflecting the multifaceted nature of human growth, echoing the journey she had traversed. In her studio, colors mingled on the canvas, blending the chaos of emotions and forging a new story rooted in authenticity. One evening, amidst the creative chaos, the unexpected arrived. An email bearing news of an art exhibition featuring her pieces flooded her with disbelief and thrill. She read and reread the invitation, realizing that her work would be recognized alongside other local artists, each grappling with their truths. Surely her struggles had not been for naught. Overcome with emotion, Chloe called Richard to share the news. He celebrated her achievement with genuine enthusiasm. The distance between them vanished as they connected on present success and future aspirations. She could feel the synergy of their efforts coming to fruition. He was reiterating that he would attend the exhibition, offering his continued support and validation. However, with this success came other revelations. Richard confided in her how the project's impact had not only changed their business operations, but also reshaped how he approached his role as a leader. "You've shown me that success is meant to be shared, not hoarded," he admitted one evening as they reviewed their progress. His recognition of shared humanity deepened their connection and established a bridge toward healing. The night of the gallery exhibition arrived, and Chloe felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as she stood among her framed pieces. Each artwork bore reflections of her struggle and triumph, a testament to her personal growth, grieving the past, and embracing the beauty of rawness. The atmosphere buzzed with support, and as guests drifted in, she caught sight of Richard, his presence grounding her with reassuring familiarity. With every passing moment, Chloe celebrated not just her artistic expression, but the depth of connection she had forged with Richard. They navigated through unexpected conversations, each person's story illuminating the shared paths of vulnerability that linked them. She felt power and connection, an undeniable energy propelling her forward. The exhibition took on unforeseen significance as more than just a platform for art. It evolved into a turning point for her and Richard. They stood hand in hand at the center of it, not as disparate figures bound by corporate ties, but as a father and daughter embracing the shared journey of vulnerability and emotional intimacy. Chloe realized at that moment that she had achieved not only professional fulfillment, but also personal redemption. She had forged a renewed connection with her father, cemented through shared experiences rather than the traditional roles of expectation. Trust and understanding brushed away the years of silence, revealing a relationship sculpted by genuine recognition of each other's fears and desires. The future lay ahead, glowing with infinite possibilities. Neither of them would shy away from the complexities ahead. They were prepared to engage in authentic discussions, daring to confront moments of doubt as they had consistently embodied growth together. In that gallery, as the crowd reveled in their stories, Chloe felt a surge of gratitude. She had conquered her fears, redefined her legacy, and illuminated not just her path, but that of her father, intertwining their journeys amidst a tapestry of creativity and connection. The moment was transformative. Not only had she achieved recognition, but she had established a profound bond with her father rooted in vulnerability and understanding. She held her head high, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing,
well, she could face it all, with Richard by her side, a compass guiding her into a world brimming with opportunity and growth. Now that you've reached this inspiring conclusion, it's crucial to be part of this journey of personal overcoming. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will leave you enlightened. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm so we can bring more transformative tales of resilience and growth. Comment your reactions and theories about Chloe's phenomenal journey. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful resolution. Don't wait even one more second to be part of something truly impactful.